Think about the last time you reached for a bar of soap, maybe this morning, maybe just a few hours ago. It's such a simple, everyday object that we hardly give it a second thought. But what if I told you that this humble item was once a powerful symbol, tangled up in ideas about wealth, power, and even what it meant to be a man or a woman in ancient societies? Soap wasn't just about getting clean, it was a silent storyteller, whispering secrets about who people were and what they believed, and the recipes they left behind. They're like time capsules waiting to be cracked open. Picture this: in ancient Egypt, the elite anointed themselves with fragrant oils and perfumed soaps, turning hygiene into a display of luxury. Meanwhile, centuries later in medieval Europe, peasants scrubbed with harsh lye soap made from ashes and animal fat, a world apart from the scented indulgences of the wealthy. These differences weren't just about preference, they were markers of class, dividing people as clearly as the clothes they wore or the homes they lived in. But it goes deeper. Soap also carried the weight of gender roles. Certain scents were deemed masculine or feminine, and the act of cleaning itself was often tied to expectations about purity and morality. The way people washed and what they washed with spoke volumes about their place in the world. Today, we're going to unravel these stories, one ancient recipe at a time. We'll explore how soap making reveals the hidden hierarchies of the past, from the temples of Mesopotamia to the bathhouses of Rome. You'll see how something as ordinary as soap can unlock extraordinary insights into the values and anxieties of ancient civilizations. By the end of this journey, you'll never look at that bar on your sink the same way again. So let's dive in, because history isn't just written in books or carved into stone. Sometimes it's hiding in plain sight, lathering up in the palms of our hands. Long before soap became a bathroom staple, it was being cooked up in the clay pots of ancient Mesopotamia over 5,000 years ago. The earliest known recipe, a simple but revolutionary mix of animal fats and wood ash, a discovery likely made by accident when fat dripped into ashes during cooking. But here's what's fascinating. The Babylonians didn't just stumble upon this formula. They documented it. Surviving clay tablets from around 2800 BCE contain step-by-step instructions for boiling fats with ashes to create a cleansing paste. This wasn't just household advice, it was chemistry, written down centuries before the word science even existed. Now, let's head south to ancient Egypt, where soap took on a whole new meaning. While the Mesopotamians focused on practicality, the Egyptians elevated soap into an art form. They swapped out rough animal fats for luxurious plant oils like castor and olive oil, then infused them with fragrant resins like frankincense and myrrh. These weren't just cleaning agents, they were status symbols used in religious ceremonies and elite grooming rituals. When archaeologists uncovered tombs, they found pots of these perfumed unguents buried alongside gold and jewels, proof that cleanliness wasn't just next to godliness, it was a privilege reserved for the powerful. But perhaps the most revealing detail lies in who used these early soaps. In Mesopotamia, temple priests washed sacred statues with purified fats and ashes before rituals, believing cleanliness could attract divine favor. Meanwhile, Egyptian medical texts prescribed specific soap blends for different ailments, linking physical purity to spiritual health. This duality, practical yet sacred, everyday yet elite, shows how deeply soap was woven into the fabric of ancient life. It wasn't just about removing dirt, it was about defining who you were in the eyes of your community and your gods. And that's the real secret hidden in these ancient recipes. Every ingredient, every method, every scented twist tells us something about the people who made them. Whether it's the Babylonian scribe carefully recording measurements or the Egyptian noble anointing themselves with precious oils, these weren't just acts of hygiene. They were statements written in lather and ashes about power, belief, and the timeless human desire to feel clean in more ways than one. In the golden halls of Egyptian palaces, soap wasn't just a tool, it was a masterpiece. Imagine a pharaoh's morning ritual, servants grinding precious myrrh into olive oil, creating a paste so fragrant it could mask the scent of the bustling Nile outside. This wasn't mere vanity, it was theater. The richer the aroma, the higher the status. While laborers scrubbed with natron, a harsh mineral salt pulled from riverbanks, the elite anointed themselves with blends fit for the gods. The message was clear: cleanliness wasn't just about dirt, it was about distance. The farther you were from the sweat and grime of daily labor, the closer you were to divinity. Now consider the temples. Before a priest could approach the statue of Ra or Isis, they underwent meticulous washing rituals, using soaps infused with frankincense to purify their very presence. Papyrus scrolls describe these ceremonies in exacting detail: how much resin to mix, how long to let it simmer, even the prayers to recite while lathering. This wasn't hygiene as we understand it today. It was a metaphysical scrubbing, a way to shed not just dirt but sin. And here's the twist: these sacred recipes weren't secret. They were inscribed in medical texts like the Ebers Papyrus, right alongside cures for headaches and broken bones. A soap recipe might sit between instructions for setting a fracture and brewing a love potion, proof that cleanliness blurred the lines between pharmacy, faith, and social order. But perhaps the most telling detail lies in who didn't have access to these luxuries. Excavations of workers' villages near the pyramids reveal something startling: jars of cheap, greasy tallow soap, gritty with leftover ash. No perfumes, no rituals, just a functional scrub to keep lice at bay. The divide wasn't just about wealth, it was about worldview. For the elite, soap was a bridge to the divine. For the commoner, just another chore. Yet even here, there's irony. Those rough, strong-armed builders hauling stone blocks under the sun, their sweat built the very tombs where perfumed soaps were entombed as eternal comforts for the privileged dead. What emerges from these fragments isn't just a history of soap, it's a map of Egyptian values. The ingredients they chose, imported resins over local salts. The bodies they anointed, living nobles and mummified kings. Even the way they wrote about it, medical texts vs. household records, and every choice whispers priorities. Cleanliness wasn't neutral, it was a language, one that spoke of power with every bubble and lather. And when we read between those lines, we start to see the unspoken rules: who got to be fragrant, who got to be holy, and who was left scrubbing away the evidence of their own existence. The grand bathhouses of Rome weren't just places to get clean, they were stages where social hierarchies played out in steam and marble. Step into one of these sprawling complexes, and you'd find senators lounging in heated pools, their skin glistening with imported olive oil soaps from Spain, while merchants a few steps away rubbed down with cheaper tallow blends. And in the crowded outer chambers, laborers scrubbed quickly with fistfuls of gritty paste made from ash and leftover animal fat, their washing as hurried as their lives. The baths pretended to be democratic spaces open to all citizens, but every detail, from the quality of the soap to the temperature of the water, whispered who really belonged. Take the strigil, that curved metal tool Romans used to scrape oil and sweat from their skin. For the wealthy, it was part of a ritual. Slaves would anoint them with perfumed oils before gently scraping away impurities, a performance of leisure and control. But for the poor, the strigil was a pragmatic tool, dragged harshly over skin to remove grime before the next grueling workday. Even the act of cleaning became a spectacle of inequality. Archaeologists have found strigils in graves, some ornate and silver-plated, others rough and iron, telling silent stories about who had the luxury to pamper and who merely needed to function. Then there were the soaps themselves. Roman recipes recovered from Pompeii reveal a stark divide. Luxurious versions scented with laurel or rosemary for the elite, while commoners relied on pungent mixes of goat fat and beechwood ash. The wealthiest even had sopo, a Gallic invention made with goat's milk and ash, shipped at great expense across the empire. But here's the irony. While the rich lathered up with these imports, many public baths recycled the same olive oil used for cooking, scooped from kitchens, mixed with lye, and redistributed as second-rate soap. The message was clear: your cleanliness reflected your worth. Yet the baths also exposed a tension in Roman values. However much they celebrated public bathing as a communal ideal, the elite still retreated to private villas for their most exclusive grooming. Letters from senators complain about the stench of the crowd in public facilities, while poets mock the pretentiousness of aristocrats who brought personal soap blends to the baths in carved ivory boxes. Even in a society obsessed with communal hygiene, the powerful clung to ways to set themselves apart. What emerges from these fragments isn't just a story about soap, it's a reflection of Rome itself. The baths, with their soaring arches and echoing halls, promised unity but delivered hierarchy. The soaps, whether perfumed or plain, weren't just cleansing agents. They were boundary markers smeared across the skin to remind everyone of their place. And the rituals, they revealed a culture that worshipped cleanliness not just for health, but as a way to perform status, one scraped off layer at a time. In medieval Europe, the hearth wasn't just for cooking, it was a soap factory. Women, often the keepers of the home, would save animal fats from meals and mix them with lye leached from ashes collected under the fire. This wasn't just chores, it was chemistry passed down mother to daughter in a quiet tradition of practicality. The resulting soap was coarse, strong-smelling, but vital for everything from scrubbing laundry to washing children's hair. Yet here's what's revealing. This domestic craft wasn't just about cleanliness. It was a silent reinforcement of gender roles. A woman's worth was measured in part by her ability to maintain a proper household, and soap-making was one of those unspoken expectations, woven into the fabric of daily life like spinning thread or baking bread. Then came the monasteries, where monks began refining these humble recipes into something more. By the 12th century, places like Savona in Italy were famous for their olive oil soaps, softer and more fragrant than the harsh tallow versions at home. Suddenly, soap wasn't just a household staple, it was a commodity, traded at markets and prized by the wealthy. But with commercialization came a shift in control. As soap grew valuable, male-dominated guilds seized production, pushing women out of the trade they'd nurtured for generations. The very act of making soap, once a woman's domain, became a regulated profession where women were sidelined to menial tasks like stirring vats, while men handled sales and profits. This shift mirrors a broader tension in medieval society. On one hand, the church preached that cleanliness was next to godliness, yet baths were often viewed with suspicion, associated with vanity or even sin. Nobles might indulge in perfumed soaps to display status, while peasants were told excessive washing could open pores to disease, and women, they were caught in the middle, expected to keep families clean but discouraged from turning that skill into economic power. Even the ingredients told a story. Rosewater soaps for wealthy ladies, lie heavy bars for laborers' wives. Every bubble carried the weight of expectation. What's fascinating is how these medieval attitudes echo forward. the idea that women naturally belonged in domestic roles, the way commerce reshaped traditional crafts, even the moral judgments tied to hygiene, they didn't vanish with the Middle Ages. They seeped into modern life, hiding in plain sight like a forgotten soap recipe scribbled in the margin of an old household ledger. And when we read those recipes today, we're not just learning how to mix ash and fat. We're deciphering a hidden language of power, one that lathers up the unspoken rules of who got to make, sell, and even define what it meant to be clean. By the 16th century, a bar of Castile soap wasn't just a cleansing product, it was a passport to prestige. Made exclusively with olive oil in the sun-drenched regions of southern Spain, this soap was so coveted that kings and queens included it in their dowries. But behind its creamy lather lay a darker story. The rise of Castile soap was inextricably tied to Spain's colonial ambitions. The same ships that carried silver and spices back from the Americas often returned laden with olive oil, pressed from trees planted on land seized during the Reconquista. This wasn't just trade, it was an early example of globalization, where luxury hygiene depended on exploited labor and conquered territories. The production process itself was a spectacle of inequality. In cities like Seville, soap makers' guilds' exclusive, male-dominated organizations guarded their recipes like state secrets, ensuring only the elite could afford the final product. Meanwhile, in the colonies, enslaved workers harvested the olive crops under brutal conditions, their labor invisible to the noblewomen who marveled at how gentle the soap felt on their skin. The irony was palpable. A product synonymous with purity was born from systems of profound impurity. Even the packaging told a story. Fine Castile soap was often stamped with royal seals or family crests, turning everyday hygiene into a performance of power. Yet the soap's appeal wasn't just about status. Its popularity mirrored a seismic shift in European beauty standards. As the Renaissance ideal of delicate, refined features took hold, harsh lye soaps associated with roughness and labor fell out of favor among the upper classes. Castile soap, with its mildness, became a tool for achieving the coveted, aristocratic pallor, free from the sun-weathered skin of peasants and workers. Advertisements from the period boasted that it could preserve feminine softness or maintain a gentleman's complexion, reinforcing the idea that gentleness was a privilege reserved for the wealthy. What's often overlooked is how this divide played out across racial lines. In colonial Latin America, Castile soap became a marker of whiteness, a way for European settlers to distinguish themselves from indigenous and African populations who often relied on traditional plant-based cleansers. Spanish authorities even taxed local soap alternatives to incentivize imports, making Castile soap not just a preference but a political tool. The message was clear: using the right soap could signal allegiance to empire, while alternatives became acts of resistance. The legacy of Castile soap lingers in unexpected ways. Today's beauty industry still frames gentleness as a luxury, with mild cleansers carrying higher price tags, a quiet echo of those Renaissance hierarchies. And when we see phrases like traditional Castile soap on modern labels, it's worth remembering what that tradition truly entailed. Not just olive oil and craftsmanship, but the shadow of empires, the weight of class, and the unspoken rules about whose skin deserved to be treated with care. The 18th century didn't just bring powdered wigs and philosophical treatises, it ushered in a revolution in how people thought about soap. Suddenly, cleanliness wasn't just a habit, it was a moral imperative, championed by Enlightenment thinkers who saw grime as evidence of ignorance. Physicians penned essays linking filth to disease, while philosophers like Rousseau declared that clean bodies reflected orderly minds. But beneath this lofty rhetoric lay a stark reality. the very soap advertised as a tool of progress became a new way to measure and punish human worth. Take the bustling streets of Paris or London, where perfumeries displayed pyramids of rose-scented soaps wrapped in gilded paper. These weren't mere commodities. They were badges of enlightenment, proof that their buyers belonged to the civilized class. Advertisements of the period dripped with judgment, promising that refined soaps could elevate the character or correct vulgar habits. Meanwhile, in rural villages, families still relied on the same harsh lye soaps their ancestors had used, if they had soap at all. The divide wasn't just economic, it was ideological. The poor weren't merely dirty, they were backward, their lack of access to fancy cleansers framed as a personal failing rather than a systemic flaw. Even the science of soap making reflected these biases. Enlightenment chemists like Nicolas Leblanc developed new methods to mass-produce purer soda ash, a key ingredient. But these innovations primarily served urban factories, not countryside kitchens. The same intellectuals who preached universal reason often shrugged at the fact that their enlightened hygiene remained out of reach for most. And when epidemics struck, the blame fell not on overcrowded slums or contaminated water, but on the filthy habits of the poor. Cleanliness, once a matter of practicality, had become a cudgel. Yet the era also birthed a cruel irony. The same philosophers who linked soap to morality also romanticized. Natural living Rousseau famously praised the noble savage, while his wealthy admirers scrubbed themselves with lavender-scented bars. The contradiction was glaring. Cleanliness symbolized progress, but too much refinement was seen as decadent. This tension echoes today in our mixed messages about hygiene, how we prize natural beauty while spending billions on elaborate skincare routines. What the Enlightenment truly revealed was soap's power as a social weapon. Recipes became more than instructions. They were boundaries separating the deserving from the unwashed. And in that lather, we see the origins of modern stigma, where poverty is still conflated with dirtiness, and access to something as simple as soap remains, for some, a privilege rather than a right. The steam-powered factories of the 19th century didn't just churn out textiles and steel, they transformed soap from a luxury into a household staple. For the first time in history, even the poorest families could afford a bar of something resembling proper soap, thanks to industrial-scale production that slashed costs. Brands like Pears and Lever Brothers flooded markets with uniform, wrapped bars, their names stamped proudly on each cake. But this newfound accessibility came with a paradox. While soap was now within reach of the masses, the hands that made it were often broken by the very system that claimed to uplift them. Picture the soap factories of London or Liverpool, where workers, many of them women and children, toiled 12-hour days stirring boiling vats of fat and lye. The air hung thick with caustic fumes that burned lungs and stained skin, while accidents from spilled chemicals were horrifically common. Yet the advertising of the era showed none of this. Instead, posters depicted rosy-cheeked children playing in sunlit tubs, their mothers smiling as they lathered them with Pears' transparent soap. The disconnect was staggering. A product marketed as the pinnacle of purity and care was born from conditions that were anything but. Advertising didn't just sell soap, it sold ideas. Lever Brothers' campaigns for Sunlight soap framed cleanliness as a civic duty, with slogans like "Cleanliness is next to godliness" hammered into public consciousness. But beneath the moralizing lay a shrewd exploitation of social anxiety. Ads targeted women especially, portraying them as guardians of domestic virtue. A dirty child or unwashed laundry wasn't just messy, it was a moral failure, a sign of maternal neglect. The message was clear: good mothers bought branded soap. And if you couldn't afford it, that silence spoke volumes. This era also cemented soap's role as a tool of empire. British factories sourced palm oil from West Africa, where colonial forces pushed local farmers off their land to meet soaring demand. The same soap that cleansed Victorian England was greased by the exploitation of colonized peoples, a hypocrisy not lost on critics. Satirical cartoons of the time showed plump businessmen scrubbing their hands with soap labeled civilization while standing atop piles of looted resources. The industrial age may have democratized soap, but it did so by reinforcing old hierarchies in new ways. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of this period was the birth of modern branding. Soap became one of the first products sold not just for what it did, but for what it symbolized. Pear's iconic packaging, with its delicate cursive and images of cherubic children, wasn't just marketing, it was storytelling, weaving cleanliness into narratives about class, motherhood, and even nationalism. The bars themselves were no longer just soap. They were tokens of belonging, tiny talismans whispering that if you used the right brand, you might just scrub your way into respectability. Yet for all its contradictions, this industrial revolution in hygiene did change lives. The plummeting cost of soap helped curb diseases like cholera in crowded cities, and the very ads that peddled guilt also spread life-saving knowledge about sanitation. Progress, it seemed, was never simple, a lesson laced into every bar of factory-made soap, bubbling with the tensions of an era that promised equality but still sorted people by the suds they could afford. Victorian England didn't just wash with soap, it weaponized it. Beneath the lace curtains and prim manners, cleanliness became a battleground where morality and class collided. Charities like the Salvation Army handed out soap to the urban poor not as charity, but as catechism, insisting that scrubbing away grime could scrub away sin. Pamphlets declared that clean skin was the first step to a clean soul, while reformers patrolled tenements, inspecting children's necks and fingernails as if dirt were evidence of divine disfavor. The message was relentless. Poverty might be unavoidable, but filth was a choice, and one that justified society's judgment. Meanwhile, in Mayfair drawing rooms, the elite turned soap into theater. Silver dishes held rose petal soaps from Paris or sandalwood cakes imported from India, their fragrances a silent boast of colonial reach. A lady's vanity wasn't complete without an array of ornate soap shapes, shells, flowers, even miniature busts of royalty, each one a testament to wealth that could afford frivolity in something as mundane as washing. The irony, these decorative soaps often went unused, their delicate shapes preserved under glass cloches like moral trophies. Cleanliness wasn't about hygiene, it was about performance, a way to signal superiority without saying a word. The recipes of the era tell this tale in suds and scent. While working-class families made do with coarse, brown soap cut from communal blocks, the wealthy indulged in violet-scented or glycerin-based varieties that promised to preserve feminine delicacy. Medical journals of the time warned that harsh soaps could coarsen a lady's complexion, framing gentleness as a virtue of both product and person. Even the act of washing became gendered. Men's soaps carried brisk, woody notes like oak moss, while women's dripped with cloying florals, reinforcing Victorian ideals of masculine vigor and feminine fragility. But the darkest twist lay in how these distinctions bled into empire. Soap advertisements featured racist caricatures, black children, whitened by scrubbing, or colonial subjects, civilized through soap equating cleanliness with whiteness and moral worth. Brands like Pear's and Monkey Brand didn't just sell products, they sold hierarchies, wrapping colonial prejudice in waxy paper. When a missionary famously declared, "Soap is the gospel in tangible form," they weren't exaggerating. In an era obsessed with social control, lather became liturgy, and the bathroom a confessional where sins of class and race were scrubbed into the skin. What's chilling is how these Victorian ideas seeped into modern life. The notion that cleanliness correlates with character, the marketing of gentleness as luxury, even the gendered packaging of care products, their legacy lingers in our pharmacies and commercials. The next time you see words like pure or refreshing on a soap wrapper, listen closely. You might just hear the echo of a Victorian moralist whispering that how you wash still defines who you are. When European ships docked on foreign shores, they carried more than guns and Bibles. They brought bars of soap, wrapped in promises of civilization. Colonial administrators wrote home about their mission to cleanse native populations, framing hygiene as a sacred duty. In India, British officials distributed soap to villagers alongside sermons, insisting that adopting European washing habits would make them worthy subjects. But this was never about health alone. Colonial reports from Africa to the Caribbean reveal a chilling pattern. Soap became a test of compliance, with those rejecting imported cleansers branded as backward or uncooperative. The very act of lathering up was twisted into loyalty. Local soap-making traditions, honed over centuries, were systematically dismantled. In West Africa, where communities had crafted rich, plant-based soaps from shea butter and palm oil, colonial taxes crushed small producers to make way for European imports. Philippine healers who blended coconut oil with medicinal herbs found their recipes dismissed as primitive superstition. Their knowledge erased in favor of factory-made bars stamped with foreign brand names. Even the scents told a story. Colonizers insisted their lavender or rose soaps were inherently superior to indigenous fragrances like lemongrass or sandalwood, reinforcing the idea that civilized smells came in European packaging. The cruelty lay in the contradictions. While missionaries preached that cleanliness brought salvation, colonial labor policies ensured many had no time or resources to wash. Mines and plantations worked native populations to exhaustion, then blamed their filth for disease outbreaks. Photographs from the era staged before and after shots of children scrubbed in mission schools propaganda that framed colonialism as benevolent, ignoring the violence that made such transformations necessary. Soap wasn't just a commodity, it was alchemy, turning oppression into virtue with every frothy lather. Yet resistance simmered beneath the surface. In Jamaica, enslaved people secretly added bitter herbs to laundry soap, ruining the linens of plantation owners as quiet rebellion. Indian nationalists boycotted British soap during the Swadeshi movement, reviving traditional neem-based recipes as acts of defiance. These weren't just practical choices, they were declarations that autonomy could be as simple as choosing what to wash with. The legacy of this colonial soap saga lingers in our bathrooms today. The global dominance of certain brands, the persistent idea that mild equals advanced, even the way we instinctively distrust strong herbal scents, these are ghosts of hierarchies pressed into our palms every time we reach for a bar. And when advertisements still promise that the right soap can elevate or transform, we're hearing echoes of an old, insidious lie, that cleanliness was ever just about dirt and not about who gets to define purity itself. Flip through a magazine from 1920 and you'll find soap ads doing more than selling suds, they're selling womanhood itself. Ivory Soap's famous slogan, 99 and 44 100% pure, didn't just describe the product, it whispered to housewives that their worth hinged on achieving that same impossible standard. Ads showed women in spotless aprons, their hands red from scrubbing, their smiles serene as if to say, "This is love." Clean children, gleaming floors, immaculate husbands, these weren't just outcomes, they were moral victories, proof a woman had earned her place in the home. And the soaps themselves, their recipes leaned into this fantasy. Palmolive added gentle oils to protect feminine hands, while Lux Flakes promised to preserve delicate fabrics, and by extension, delicate marriages. But step into the men's aisle and the messaging flipped. Ads for brands like Lifebuoy or Williams shaving soap didn't bother with domestic bliss. They showed athletes, soldiers, explorers, men who didn't wash for others but to dominate. Lifebuoy's B.O. campaigns preyed on fears of social failure, warning that one whiff of sweat could cost a man his job or respect. The soaps mirrored this harsh, medicinal scents like carbolic or pine, formulas that stripped grime like a wire brush. Where women's products promised to preserve, men's vowed to conquer, reinforcing the idea that masculinity was a performance of strength, not care. The genius and cruelty of these campaigns was how they disguised commerce as common sense. By linking soap to identity, advertisers made skipping a brand feel like betraying your gender. A housewife reaching for a man's soap risked seeming coarse. A man caught with a floral bar faced ridicule. Even the colors reinforced the divide: pastel pinks and blues for women, stark reds and greens for men. These weren't arbitrary choices. Market research showed consumers internalized these cues, associating certain scents and hues with virtue or vigor. Yet the most insidious effect was how these ads reframed inequality as nature. When women's magazines claimed that cleanliness is a mother's instinct, or men's journals insisted that real men needed rugged soap, they turned social roles into biology. The actual recipes told another story. Those gentle women's soaps, often just diluted versions of men's formulas with added perfume. The strength in men's bars. Marketing, not chemistry. The divide wasn't in the suds. It was in the minds of the people lathering up, scrubbing away at expectations they didn't even know they'd absorbed. What's haunting is how these 20th century scripts still play out today. Walk down any drugstore aisle and you'll see, for her, soaps dripping with honey, and for him, bars black as charcoal. The language has softened, but the message remains. Cleanliness isn't just about dirt. It's about who society tells you to be, one bar of soap at a time. When the First World War erupted, governments didn't just ration food and fuel, they rationed cleanliness itself. Soap, once a mundane household item, became a matter of national security, with shortages revealing stark inequalities. While officers at the front received neatly packaged bars stamped with military insignia, working-class families back home stretched slivers of soap across weeks, grating shavings into wash water to make it last. Public health posters proclaimed, "A clean soldier is a fighting soldier," while newspapers warned that neglecting hygiene was akin to aiding the enemy. Suddenly, lathering up wasn't just personal, it was patriotic, a way to do your bit without setting foot on the battlefield. The propaganda was relentless. British ads showed children scrubbing their hands beneath the watchful eyes of Kitchener's pointing finger, while German leaflets depicted soap bubbles forming shields against disease. In the United States, the War Industries Board took control of soap production, diverting fats from kitchens to factories under slogans like "Save the scraps for the boys overseas." Yet these campaigns concealed uncomfortable truths. Wealthier households hoarded pre-war luxuries like French milled soaps, while tenement dwellers resorted to harsh substitutes made from industrial byproducts. The disparity was so glaring that some labor unions protested, arguing that clean skin shouldn't be a privilege of class, especially when everyone was supposedly united in sacrifice. For soldiers, soap took on eerie symbolism. Trench warfare turned hygiene into a desperate act of defiance against the mud, rats, and decay closing in on all sides. Military-issue soap, often odorless to avoid betraying positions, became one of the few comforts linking men to a semblance of humanity. letters home begged for familiar scents, a bar of sandalwood from a sweetheart, a cake of pine tar soap from a mother's pantry. These weren't just practical requests, they were lifelines to a world where cleanliness still meant something beyond survival. Yet the war also birthed eerie innovations. When glycerin, a soap byproduct, was needed for explosives, chemists developed synthetic alternatives. The same factories that once made lavender-scented bars now churned out utilitarian blocks labeled war soap, free of perfumes, dyes, or any trace of indulgence. Even the act of washing became militarized, with drill sergeants timing recruits' ablutions to the second. The message was clear: efficiency in hygiene mirrored efficiency in combat. By World War II, the stakes grew darker. Nazi Germany weaponized cleanliness, framing Jews as disease carriers, while distributing soap stamped with nationalist slogans to Aryan families. Meanwhile, in Allied nations, soap rationing hit communities of color hardest, as redlining and discriminatory policies left black and immigrant neighborhoods with fewer sanitation resources. The bitter irony: many of the fats fueling wartime soap production came from colonies where locals couldn't afford the finished product. What these wartime campaigns reveal is how easily hygiene slips into the language of control. Whether wrapped in patriotism or perverted by prejudice, soap became more than a tool. It was a mirror, reflecting who a society valued, who it sacrificed, and who it deemed worthy of something as simple as feeling clean. And in those suds, we glimpse an uncomfortable truth. Even in moments of collective crisis, the bubbles of privilege never quite burst. The post-war boom didn't just fill store shelves with soap, it rewrote the very meaning of cleanliness. As veterans returned home and suburbs sprawled across former battlefields, soap manufacturers seized the moment, transforming humble bars into emblems of modernity. Suddenly, antibacterial soaps promised to shield families from invisible threats, while liquid cleansers in sleek plastic bottles turned bathroom sinks into mini laboratories. Advertising campaigns didn't just sell products, they sold anxiety wrapped in pastel packaging. A 1955 ad for Dial soap famously warned, "Don't let your family be the weak link." Equating hygiene with social survival in an era obsessed with conformity and Cold War paranoia. Yet this explosion of choice masked a deeper shift. Soap was no longer a simple necessity, it became a lifestyle accessory. Ads showed impeccably dressed housewives beaming at their spotless bathrooms, their hands cradling floral-scented bars like trophies. Teenagers were targeted with zesty, deodorant soaps that promised popularity alongside cleanliness, while men's products boasted industrial-strength formulas to match their new white-collar identities. The subtext was unmistakable. The right soap didn't just clean, it elevated, slotting neatly into the post-war dream of upward mobility. Behind the glossy campaigns, however, cracks were forming. Scientists began questioning the long-term effects of synthetic additives like triclosan in antibacterial soaps, while environmentalists pointed to the mountains of non-biodegradable packaging piling up in landfills. The very chemicals that promised better living through chemistry were starting to stain the era's optimism. By the late 1960s, counterculture health stores were pushing back with handmade, plant-based soaps crude by commercial standards, but carrying a quiet rebellion against the industrial hygiene complex. This tension between progress and doubt crystallized in the rise of liquid soap. Introduced as the future of cleanliness in the 1970s, it swapped traditional fats for petroleum-based surfactants, trading biodegradability for convenience. Ads marveled at its space-age pump bottles, but homemakers noticed something unsettling. The more advanced soap became, the less it resembled anything their grandparents would recognize. The irony, many of these innovations were repackaged versions of wartime synthetic formulas, rebranded for peacetime consumers. What truly defined this era, though, was soap's role as a cultural barometer. The same decade that gave us brightly colored bubble baths also spawned the first EPA regulations on detergent pollution. The antibacterial craze that promised safety also fueled germophobia, teaching a generation to see the world as dirty by default. And the explosion of personalized soaps for men, women, babies, even pets didn't just reflect market segmentation. It mirrored a society increasingly fractured by demographic niches. In the end, the mid-century soap boom wasn't just about getting clean. It was about navigating a world where hygiene had become tangled with identity, where lathering up could signal everything from political leanings to parenting skills. And as those suds spiraled down post-war drains, they carried with them the contradictions of an era that worshipped progress but couldn't quite scrub away the costs. By the 1980s, something unexpected bubbled up in kitchens and craft fairs across the world: the smell of lye and olive oil, of lavender and beeswax, as amateur soap makers rediscovered centuries-old techniques. This wasn't just nostalgia, it was a quiet revolution, as industrial brands filled stores with neon-colored gels promising 99.9% germ elimination. A growing number of people began questioning what those unpronounceable chemicals were doing to their skin and the environment. The natural soap movement didn't just reject modernity, it reached back to a time when soap wasn't a synthetic cocktail, but a simple alchemy of fats, ashes, and care. Dig into the workshops of these early artisans, and you'll find recipes ripped straight from history. Medieval tallow soaps reborn with ethical sourcing, Castile-style bars stirred in copper pots just as Spanish monks had done. The difference: this time, the makers were often women, reclaiming a domestic craft that industrialization had stripped from their great-grandmothers. They traded petroleum-based detergents for coconut oil, swapped artificial fragrances for crushed rosemary or chamomile tea. Each bar was a statement. Cleanliness didn't have to come at the cost of connection to the earth, to tradition, to the rhythm of slow, deliberate making. Yet for all its idealism, the movement carried an uncomfortable paradox. Those hand-cut, herb-speckled bars often sold for 5 times the price of mass-produced soaps, landing on the shelves of upscale boutiques rather than neighborhood markets. A lavender and oatmeal loaf might be framed as self-care, but its cost put it out of reach for the very communities most exposed to industrial pollution. The irony was sharp. A return to simpler times became a luxury few could afford. Even the language of marketing revealed the divide. Terms like artisanal and small batch subtly coded these products as exclusive, reinforcing the idea that ethical living was a privilege, not a right. Still, the movement sparked something undeniable. Farmers' markets began hosting soap-making demos. YouTube tutorials democratized centuries-old techniques, and suddenly, that humble bar became a gateway to broader conversations about sustainability, about corporate transparency, even about reclaiming autonomy over what we put on our bodies. When a teenager in Ohio could trace her shea butter soap recipe back to a Ghanaian village, or a retired teacher in France revived her grandmother's ash leaching method, it wasn't just about cleaning skin. It was about stitching together broken threads of knowledge, one lather at a time. The most profound legacy of this revival, though, might be how it reframed value. In a world of disposable conveniences, handmade soap demanded something radical: patience. Cold process recipes took weeks to cure. Each ingredient required scrutiny. To use one of these bars was to participate in slowness, to acknowledge that some things shouldn't be rushed, and in that mindfulness perhaps lay the real rebellion, not just against chemicals, but against the very idea that purity could ever be mass-produced. In the quiet moments before prayer, a Muslim performing wudu isn't just washing their hands, they're stepping into a sacred rhythm that spans centuries. The ritual cleansing with water and sometimes soap before facing Mecca isn't about hygiene alone. It's about preparing the soul as much as the body. Islamic texts specify precise sequences: washing hands, mouth, nostrils, face, arms, and feet, each motion a meditation on purity. But look closer and you'll find fascinating nuances. Some scholars debate whether modern soaps with synthetic fragrances fulfill the requirement of clean water, while others insist the intent matters more than the chemistry. These discussions aren't just theological, they reveal how faith adapts to changing worlds, all through the lens of something as simple as lather. Jewish mikveh rituals take this symbolism even deeper. The immersion in natural water sources originally without soap wasn't merely about removing dirt, but about rebirth. After menstruation, childbirth, or conversion, the mikveh marked transitions, washing away not impurities but states of being. Yet over time, practicalities intervened. Rabbinical authorities began requiring pre-immersion showers with soap to ensure the mikveh waters stayed physically clean. This seemingly small adjustment speaks volumes about balancing spiritual ideals with communal realities. The soap here acts as a bridge between the earthly and the divine, a tool to protect the sacred while honoring the mundane. Hindu traditions weave soap into ceremonies in unexpected ways. During festivals like Diwali, families scrub their homes with water and herbal pastes, often homemade from neem or turmeric, before creating intricate rangoli designs at their doorsteps. The act isn't just cleaning, it's an invitation. Dirt represents lingering negativity, while the aromatic herbs in the soap symbolize renewal. Even the choice of ingredients carries meaning: turmeric, believed to ward off evil, or sandalwood, associated with the gods. Every bubble becomes a prayer, every rinse an offering. Christianity's history with soap is more paradoxical. While medieval monks perfected soap making in their cloisters, early church fathers sometimes viewed excessive bathing as vanity. Yet baptismal fonts, often scented with rose oil or myrrh, echoed the idea of spiritual cleansing. The tension persists today. Some churches distribute blessed soaps for healing rituals, while others warn against conflating physical and moral purity. This duality reflects a broader struggle: how to honor the body as a temple without worshipping at the altar of appearances. What unites these traditions isn't just the act of washing, but the shared belief that cleanliness transcends the skin. When Buddhist monks wash their alms bowls with ash soap, or Shinto priests purify shrines with cedar-infused water, they're participating in a universal language, one where soap isn't just a commodity, but a covenant. The ingredients chosen: olive oil in Islamic Siddur soap, honey in Jewish Sabbath soaps, aren't arbitrary. They're theological statements about abundance, humility, or sacrifice. And the methods, whether the precise pause of wudu or the full body immersion of mikveh, map belief systems onto the body itself. Perhaps this is why, in an age of mass-produced gels and foams, religious soap recipes endure. They remind us that cleansing was never just about removing what's unwanted, but about making space for what's sacred. And in that space between the water and the skin, the ritual and the routine, we glimpse the oldest truth of all, that how we wash reveals what we worship. Walk into any upscale boutique today, and you'll find soap displayed like jewelry, hand-cut bars nestled in handcrafted wooden boxes, wrapped in artisan paper, priced higher than some week's grocery bills. These aren't just cleansers, they're statements: cold-processed lavender with Himalayan pink salt, charcoal-infused bars for detoxing, even gold-flecked soaps marketed as skincare investments. The language alone tells a story: small batch, farm to sink, triple milled. These phrases don't describe function, they sell identity and the buyers. They're not just purchasing soap, they're curating an ethos, one lather at a time. Yet step into a dollar store and the scene flips. Here, soap is stacked in shrink-wrapped multi-packs, its primary virtue being affordability. No one debates the provenance of the palm oil or the poetry of the packaging. The divide isn't just about price, it's about perception. Luxury soap adds whisper about self-care and sustainability, while budget brands shout about value and volume. The irony: many of those expensive artisanal bars share core ingredients with their mass-market cousins, just repackaged, rebranded, and steeped in narrative. This modern soap hierarchy mirrors ancient patterns in unsettling ways. Just as Roman elites imported Gallic soap while plebeians reused kitchen grease, today's wellness-minded consumers pay premiums for plastic-free shampoo bars, while others rely on dollar store liquid soap in single-use bottles. The difference now is the veneer of virtue. Buying a $20 activated charcoal bar isn't just indulgence, it's framed as environmental activism, a way to vote with your wallet. Never mind that the carbon footprint of shipping shea butter from Ghana to Brooklyn might offset the benefits. The performance of purity matters more than the math. Even the ingredients betray class codes. Coconut oil and almond milk soaps grace Whole Foods shelves, while discount retailers stock petroleum-based detergents. The former boast about what they contain: argan oil, calendula. The latter about what they remove: kills 99% of germs. The messaging splits along familiar lines: luxury for nurturing, economy for necessity. It's the Victorian workhouse soap versus Castile royalty, repackaged for the age of conscious capitalism. But here's the twist: the artisanal soap movement, for all its elitism, has also democratized something unexpected: knowledge. YouTube tutorials teach anyone to make soap at home, blurring the lines between producer and consumer. A barista in Portland crafts rosemary olive oil bars in her kitchen. A retired teacher in Texas sells honey oatmeal soaps at the farmer's market. This DIY spirit harks back to medieval women stirring ash and fat over hearths, reclaiming control from corporate giants. Yet even here, hierarchies creep in. The homemade soap sold at chic urban markets fetches 5 times the price of identical bars at a rural craft fair. The materials might be equal, but the zip code isn't. What's revealing is how these choices are framed. Splurging on a handcrafted lemongrass soap isn't called expensive, it's worth it. Meanwhile, buying a 6-pack of generic soap isn't practical, it's settling. The language we use betrays unspoken judgments, turning grocery lists into moral ledgers. And just as colonial missionaries once equated soap with salvation, modern wellness culture implies that the right soap can save you from toxins, from mediocrity, even from yourself. The next time you pick up a bar of soap, pause, feel its weight, read its label. Whether it's a $5 drugstore staple or a $50 skincare experience, remember, you're not just choosing how to clean your hands. You're navigating a centuries-old story of who gets to be pure, who gets to be pampered, and who decides which bubbles are worth the price. Aisle after aisle, the message used to be clear: pink bottles for her, dark blues for him, florals versus woodsy musk. But something's shifting on those shelves. Brands like Harry's and Dove now market their soaps with minimalist packaging and neutral scents. Think bergamot instead of roses, cedar rather than ocean blast. Even the language is changing. For hands, not genders, reads one label while another boasts skin is skin. It's more than a marketing trend. It's a quiet rebellion against centuries of soap being a badge of identity. Yet scratch beneath the surface and old habits die hard. Walk into any drugstore and you'll still find men's soaps promising extreme grit and power cleanse, while women's versions tout softening milk and delicate moisture. The subtext lingers like a stubborn stain, toughness for him, tenderness for her. Even some unisex brands can't resist subtle coding. Black packaging with angular fonts reads masculine, while pastel containers with cursive script whisper feminine. The paradox is striking. In an era where gender fluidity is gaining acceptance, we're still lathering up with leftovers from Victorian morality plays. The resistance isn't just corporate nostalgia, it's economic. Market research shows gendered products drive sales by playing on insecurities. A mother might buy a gentle baby soap for her daughter, but tough antiseptic for her son, reinforcing stereotypes before kids can even read the labels. Meanwhile, older consumers raised on binary branding often default to familiar pink or blue bottles out of habit. The soap industry knows this and profits from it. But the cracks in this system are widening. Independent brands like Portland's Wildest or Berlin's Unpaced don't just avoid gender labels, they mock them. One sells a soap called Human Being with ingredients listed as water plus stuff. Another packages bars in plain brown paper stamped with a single word, clean. Their success, especially among younger buyers, hints at a generational shift. For them, soap isn't about performing gender, it's about washing hands. The deeper significance, this isn't just about soap. It's about who gets to define purity in the 21st century. When a non-binary teen can pick up a neutral bergamot bar without feeling pigeonholed, or a dad can lather with lavender without raised eyebrows, it normalizes the idea that cleanliness, and by extension, care isn't owned by any one identity. The suds are just the start. The gleaming aisles of modern supermarkets hide a dirty secret. Every bar of soap comes with an invisible price tag, one measured in deforestation, carbon emissions, and mountains of plastic waste. Take palm oil, found in nearly half of all commercial soaps. Its production devastates rainforests from Indonesia to the Amazon, displacing indigenous communities and endangering species like orangutans. Yet switching to alternatives like coconut or olive oil often means higher costs, putting eco-friendly options out of reach for budget-conscious families. This isn't just an environmental crisis, it's a class divide where the privilege of being green hinges on what you can afford to lather up with. Plastic packaging tells a similar story. Every year, over 120 billion units of soap packaging mostly non-recyclable plastic bottles and wrappers clog landfills and oceans, while zero-waste brands champion naked bars wrapped in compostable paper. These solutions often cater to affluent shoppers willing to pay premium prices. Meanwhile, bulk buy liquid soaps in disposable containers remain the default for schools, hospitals, and low-income households. The irony is stark. Those least responsible for environmental harm often bear the brunt of both pollution and the high cost of solutions. Some brands are turning to the past for answers. Companies like Dr. Bronner's resurrect centuries-old Castile recipes using organic oils and biodegradable ingredients. Others, inspired by medieval monastic methods, blend ashes with plant-based fats for truly ancient-style soaps. These products aren't just gentle on skin, they break down harmlessly in waterways, a far cry from the synthetic surfactants that choke marine life. Yet scaling these traditions faces hurdles. Artisanal production can't match the speed or volume of factories, and sourcing ethical ingredients drives up prices. The result, a market where sustainability becomes a luxury rather than a standard. Grassroots movements are challenging this status quo. In Nairobi, women's collectives craft soap from recycled cooking oil and local aloe vera, selling it at sliding scale prices. Appalachian communities revive Depression-era lye soap techniques, trading recipes at farmers' markets. These initiatives prove that eco-conscious hygiene needn't be elitist, but they struggle against the tide of corporate marketing that prioritizes convenience over conscience. The tension between accessibility and sustainability isn't new. 18th century Londoners faced soap taxes that made cleanliness a privilege. Today's barriers are subtler but no less real. What's different now is the stakes. With microplastics infiltrating our water and climate change accelerating, the soap in your hand isn't just a personal choice. It's a vote for the kind of world we'll leave bubbling in our wake. When Tyler Durden in Fight Club steals human fat from liposuction clinics to craft artisanal soap, he isn't just making a product, he's weaponizing a symbol. The scene, dripping with irony, twists soap's traditional association with purity into a critique of consumer culture. Selling rich women their own fat asses back to them, he sneers, turning hygiene into rebellion. This wasn't just cinematic shock value, it crystallized soap's dual role in pop culture, as both a tool of conformity and a vessel for subversion. The bars Durden peddles, stamped with slick corporate logos, mark the very idea that cleanliness could ever be divorced from capitalism's grubby hand. But Fight Club isn't alone in using soap as cultural shorthand. Think of the iconic Karate Kid scene where Mr. Miyagi teaches wax on, wax off with a bar of soap, transforming a chore into a metaphor for discipline. Or the dark humor of Breaking Bad, where Walter White's descent into crime begins in a soap factory, literalizing the idea of washing away one's sins. Even children's media plays with the trope. SpongeBob SquarePants' obsession with bubble blowing isn't just whimsy. It's a nod to soap's almost magical ability to conjure joy from something mundane. Internet culture, meanwhile, has turned soap into a punchline. Memes like "delete your browser history or I'll eat the soap" weaponize its association with punishment, harkening back to parents threatening to wash mouths out with soap for foul language. TikTok trends show teens rating hotel soaps like sommeliers, parodying luxury culture's obsession with curation. These jokes work because they tap into a shared understanding. Soap isn't just functional, it's freighted with unspoken rules about morality, class, and even rebellion. The most fascinating examples, though, come from literature. In Macbeth, Lady Macbeth's frantic hand washing out damned spot turns soap's absence into a metaphor for guilt. Centuries later, the help subverts that idea. The homemade soap Minnie uses becomes an act of quiet resistance, her care for a white child undermining racist hierarchies. Even sci-fi gets in on it. Snowpiercer's dystopian train features a scene where elites toss artisanal soap to the starving masses, a chilling metaphor for hollow charity. What ties these disparate portrayals together is soap's unique ability to mirror societal anxieties. When a culture fears contamination, whether literal germs or moral decay, soap becomes a protagonist. When it rails against artifice, soap morphs into a prop for satire. The next time you see a soap dish in a film or a meme, pay attention. That unassuming bar isn't just cleaning hands. It's scrubbing at the boundaries of what we value, who we blame, and how we perform purity in an increasingly messy world. There's something almost meditative about the act of lathering soap between your hands, the rhythmic motion, the scent rising with the steam, the way the water rinses away not just dirt but the weight of the day. Science backs this up. Studies show that simple rituals like hand washing can lower cortisol levels, offering a momentary reset for an overwhelmed mind. In hospitals, nurses report that washing their hands isn't just about infection control. It's a mental buffer between patients, a way to compartmentalize stress. The psychology here is profound. Soap becomes more than a cleanser. It's a tactile anchor, a small but tangible way to exert control in a chaotic world. Yet this same need for control can spiral. For some, the compulsion to wash crosses from comfort into compulsion, a hallmark of conditions like obsessive-compulsive disorder. Imagine scrubbing your hands raw, convinced that no amount of soap can erase an invisible contamination. Historically, this duality has always existed. Medieval monks scoured their bodies to purify their souls, while Victorian households turned cleanliness into a moral litmus test. Today, the pandemic amplified these tensions. Hand washing saved lives, but for many, it also became a prison of repetition. The line between therapeutic ritual and torment lies not in the soap itself, but in the mind holding it. Therapy offices see this paradox daily. A patient with anxiety might find solace in the predictability of a lavender-scented hand-washing routine, while another battling OCD feels trapped by it. Psychologists even have a term for this: contamination anxiety, where the fear of germs overrides logic. What's revealing is how soap commercials inadvertently feed this cycle. Ads promising 99.9% germ elimination don't just sell cleanliness, they sell the illusion of absolute safety, a fantasy our brains are desperate to believe. But there's another layer, the social stigma tied to uncleanliness. Employers unconsciously favor candidates who look clean, classrooms reward children with spotless uniforms, and strangers recoil from body odors they deem unacceptable. These judgments aren't just about health, they're shortcuts our brains use to assess trustworthiness and status. The flip side, people experiencing homelessness or poverty often face dehumanizing assumptions based on their access to hygiene, a cruel twist where soap becomes a gatekeeper of dignity. Perhaps the most fascinating insight comes from cross-cultural research. In Japan, the ritual of washing hands before entering a shrine is about mental preparation as much as physical purity. In Sweden, the communal sauna tradition includes washing not just to clean, but to signal equality. Everyone bare, everyone scrubbed to the same baseline. These practices reveal a universal truth: soap is never just about removing grime. It's a script we follow to navigate belonging, anxiety, and even our place in the social hierarchy. The next time you reach for that bar, pause. Notice how it feels, the weight, the scent, the way the lather spreads. That simple act contains millennia of human longing for safety, for order, for a fleeting sense that no matter what chaos lies beyond the sink, here, in this moment, you're in control. And that's the real magic of soap, not just what it washes away, but what it allows us to believe, one bubble at a time. When COVID-19 swept across the globe, something remarkable happened. Soap, that unassuming bathroom staple, suddenly became front-page news. Public health officials held up bars of plain soap like sacred talismans, their message urgent and simple. 20 seconds of lathering could mean the difference between life and death. For the first time in generations, the entire world was having the same conversation about hand washing, echoing 19th century cholera campaigns and wartime hygiene drives. But this time, the stakes were visceral. Supermarket shelves emptied of soap as quickly as toilet paper, and suddenly, that humble bar felt as essential as oxygen. The irony, the science behind soap's power against viruses isn't new. Soap molecules have always been master saboteurs, their dual-ended structure prying apart lipid membranes like microscopic crowbars. What changed during the pandemic was perception. Those bubbly diagrams in health ads weren't just illustrations, they were survival guides. TikTok videos showing pepper flakes fleeing soapy water went viral, not just because they were clever, but because they made an invisible threat feel conquerable. In a world of uncertainty, soap offered something rare: agency. Yet the crisis also ripped open old wounds. While affluent neighborhoods stocked up on artisanal sanitizers and organic soaps, low-income communities faced barren shelves in dollar stores. Homeless shelters scrambled for donations, and refugees in crowded camps had no clean water to lather with, let alone soap. The disparity wasn't just logistical, it was lethal. Studies showed COVID-19 mortality rates were higher in areas with poor sanitation access, a grim reminder that soap's life-saving power depends entirely on who can reach it. Public health campaigns tried to bridge the gap. Celebrities filmed hand-washing tutorials, governments distributed free soap packets, and UNICEF launched emergency hygiene programs. But the deeper issue lingered. Why did it take a pandemic for the world to acknowledge what historians had long documented, that soap access is a privilege, not a given? The parallels to past crises were haunting. Just as 19th century tenement dwellers died of cholera while the rich blamed their dirty habits, COVID-19 disproportionately punished those already marginalized by systemic neglect. Perhaps the most unexpected twist was soap's symbolic resurgence. In Italy, neighbors sang from balconies with soap suds still dripping from their wrists. In Japan, handmade soaps shaped like cherry blossoms appeared outside hospitals, gifts for exhausted nurses. Even the act of washing became communal, a ritual performed simultaneously by millions, each lather a silent pledge to protect not just themselves, but strangers they'd never meet. What the pandemic laid bare wasn't just soap's utility, but its duality. It's both a great equalizer capable of saving anyone who uses it, and a dividing line revealing who society values enough to keep clean. The lesson lingers long after the masks came off. In the fight between humans and pathogens, soap remains one of our oldest, smartest weapons, but its power is only as just as the hands that hold it. The future of soap is unfolding in laboratories and startups where scientists are rewriting ancient recipes for a planet in crisis. Imagine a world where your shower gel isn't just cleanser, but a time-released capsule of probiotics, designed to nourish your skin microbiome while leaving zero trace in waterways. Or bars of soap embedded with enzymes that break down microplastics as you wash, a literal solution to pollution swirling down the drain. These aren't sci-fi fantasies. Companies like Ensigh and EcoFroth are already prototyping algae-based soaps that consume carbon during production, while waterless, dry bath powders, popularized in drought-stricken regions, could redefine hygiene for a climate-changed world. The innovation is dazzling, but the real question lingers: who will these advancements actually serve? History offers a cautionary tale. Every leap in soap technology, from medieval lye to Victorian glycerin, initially benefited the wealthy before trickling down. Today's green soaps risk repeating that pattern. A single bar of pH-balanced, plastic-free shampoo soap can cost 10 times its mass-produced counterpart, pricing out those already hardest hit by environmental degradation. Meanwhile, corporations patent revolutionary, biodegradable formulas, while small-scale producers in the global south, who have crafted sustainable plant-based cleansers for generations, find their traditional knowledge commodified without compensation. The ethical dilemma is stark. Does progress mean inventing new solutions, or simply valuing old ones fairly? The most promising developments bridge this divide. In Nairobi, a social enterprise trains street youth to make affordable soap from invasive water hyacinth, tackling unemployment and water pollution simultaneously. Indian engineers have devised solar-powered soap factories that turn waste cooking oil into cleanser for slum communities. These models hint at a future where innovation isn't just about cutting-edge chemistry, but about rethinking who controls the means of cleanliness. The real breakthrough may lie not in the soap itself, but in democratizing its creation. Yet challenges loom. Regulatory hurdles favor big brands over grassroots makers, while biodegradable claims often mask ingredients that degrade only under ideal conditions. And in a world where 2 billion still lack basic sanitation, high-tech solutions can feel like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Perhaps the answer lies in hybrid thinking, pairing ancient wisdom with modern scale. Picture municipal composting programs that harvest lye from fireplace ashes, or open-source soap recipes tailored to local plants and pollutants. The future of cleanliness won't be found in a single patent, but in 1,000 context-specific solutions lathering together. What's certain is this: soap's next chapter will test whether humanity can clean up its act without leaving anyone behind. The Mesopotamians who first mixed ash and fat 5,000 years ago couldn't have imagined their discovery would one day carry such weight. But as climate disasters intensify and inequities grow, that humble bar becomes more than a tool, it's a mirror, reflecting whether we'll repeat the exclusions of the past or finally wash them away. There's something almost alchemical about watching oils and lye transform into soap, a quiet magic that DIY makers are rediscovering in kitchens worldwide. This isn't just crafting, it's time travel. Modern hobbyists hunched over digital scales and silicone molds are echoing Mesopotamian priests who first documented soap recipes on clay tablets. The tools have changed: digital thermometers instead of open fires, precision-cut molds instead of hand-carved wooden frames, but the thrill remains the same. When a beginner unwraps their first homemade bar after weeks of curing, they're not just holding soap, they're holding a thread that stretches back millennia, connecting them to every ancestor who ever mixed fat and ash to chase away grime. Yet this revival isn't purely romantic. Scrolling through soap-making forums reveals fierce debates. Is it ethical to sell Mayan clay soaps when the recipe comes from an anthropology textbook? Should a hobbyist in Norway be marketing neem and turmeric bars as authentic Ayurveda? The line between appreciation and appropriation blurs when ancient traditions become Etsy trends. Some makers collaborate directly with cultural custodians, like a collective in New Mexico partnering with Diné elders to source local juniper ash respectfully. Others, though, lift indigenous knowledge without context, turning sacred recipes into spa day gimmicks. The suds tell a story. Reclaiming history requires more than following old instructions. It demands understanding whose hands wrote them. Safety, too, becomes a paradox in this back-to-basics movement. Those medieval monks stirring lye in open courtyards knew its dangers. One wrong splash could blind. Modern dyers have goggles and pH strips, but social media glosses over the risks. Viral videos show influencers swirling vibrant colors into melt and pour bases, rarely mentioning that working with raw lye requires ventilation, protective gear, and chemical discipline. Online communities oscillate between empowerment and recklessness, with seasoned makers pleading for caution while beginners chase Instagram-perfect swirls. The irony: the very industrialization these crafters reject gave us standardized safety protocols they now must rediscover. What's undeniable is the movement's hunger for authenticity. In an age of algorithmic shopping and disposable conveniences, soap making offers tactile rebellion. Each step calculating saponification values, infusing oils with homegrown lavender, patiently waiting out the cure becomes an antidote to instant gratification. Some makers even seek out historical accuracy, rendering tallow from pasture-raised sheep like medieval farmers, or leaching lye from hardwood ashes as pioneers did. The result isn't just soap, it's a sensory bridge to pre-packaged past. Perhaps the most profound impact lies in how these hobbyists are rewriting modern relationships with hygiene. A generation raised on antibacterial gels and kills 99.9% of germs, slogans learns that soap's power isn't in annihilation, but balance gentle enough to preserve skin's microbiome while lifting away dirt. When a teenager gifts their grandmother a honey and oatmeal bar formulated for arthritic hands, or a father teaches his child to trace family roots through a Lithuanian salt soap recipe, cleanliness transcends utility. It becomes heritage whispered in lather rather than ink. This revival raises a tantalizing question. If something as simple as soap can reconnect us with lost wisdom, what other everyday rituals hold similar potential? The answer might be bubbling in a slow cooker of oils right now, tended by someone who's discovered that the past isn't gone. It's just waiting to be stirred back to life. From the moment an ancient Babylonian scribe pressed cuneiform symbols into clay to record the first soap recipe, humanity's relationship with cleanliness has never been just about scrubbing away grime. It's been a mirror reflecting who we are, who we aspire to be, and who we've too often left behind. Consider this, the same Mesopotamian formula of ash and fat that once purified temple statues would later grease the wheels of empire, colonize continents, and even shape modern beauty standards. The unassuming bar on your sink carries the weight of revolutions, the scent of rebellions, and the residue of countless unspoken rules about who deserves to feel pure. What makes soap's story so extraordinary isn't just its endurance across 5,000 years, but its adaptability. It's been a sacred offering in Egyptian tombs, a currency of compliance in colonial outposts, a battleground for gender norms in Victorian ads, and most recently, a lifeline during a pandemic. Through every era, soap absorbed the anxieties and aspirations of its time, whether that meant Renaissance chemists tweaking recipes to match new ideals of refinement, or 20th century factories churning out patriotism in waxy bricks stamped with war slogans. The ingredients changed, but the pattern held. How we wash reveals what we value. Yet history's greatest lesson might be soap's uncomfortable duality. For every moment it united communities, like the shared lather of Roman baths or the collective hand-washing rituals of COVID-19, it also divided. The same Victorian moralists who preached that cleanliness was next to godliness used soap as a cudgel to shame the poor. The colonial administrators who distributed soap as civilization often denied clean water to the very people they claimed to uplift. Even today, the gleaming aisles of green beauty products whisper a quiet exclusion. Ethical hygiene shouldn't be a luxury, yet for many it still is. So where does that leave us? Perhaps with a simple but radical question. What if we reimagined soap's next chapter not as a reflection of existing power structures, but as a challenge to them? Imagine urban gardens growing soapwort plants for neighborhood cooperatives, or schools teaching soap making alongside history, connecting chemistry to colonialism, lye to labor rights. Picture a world where access to gentle, sustainable cleansers isn't dictated by zip codes, and where the stories behind our soaps are as visible as their suds. The next time you rinse your hands, take a second to listen. That lather isn't just water and oil, it's the echo of 1,000 years of human ingenuity, inequality, and resilience. And the beautiful part, we're still writing its story. Whether it's choosing plastic-free brands, reviving ancestral recipes, or questioning why certain scents are coded masculine or feminine, every bar we pick is a vote for the kind of world we want to live in. After 5 millennia, soap's ultimate lesson might be this: cleanliness isn't just about what we wash away, it's about what we choose to leave behind.